Greetings. So there's no question that in almost every organization, and I'm including family in the category of organization, we come face to face with those who test our limits, who push our buttons, who frustrate, upset, antagonize, and otherwise bother us and annoy the hell out of us. Where we just want to scream. And we often refer to these people as difficult, irritating, or rude, folks with whom we don't want to work or, to tell the truth, be around all that much. So from my perspective, the question is not so much what makes them difficult, but what we tell ourselves about them that makes them difficult. That is, what is it in us that supports or triggers our reactivity? What are the stories and characterizations we tell ourselves about these other folks that bring us to label them difficult? She is so this and he is so that, et cetera, et cetera. And we fill these characterizations with our negative judgments and criticisms or descriptions that categorize them as difficult. And if and when we inquire within, that is, when we ask ourselves, what is really, really, really true about this person's being difficult? Experience might suggest that if it's not so much another's behavior that's all that egregious or outlandish or difficult or off the charts or aberrant. More often it's the story we tell ourselves about that person, the story that we take as real, the story we assume is true. So when we feel that urge to label another as difficult, a first step is to check out the reality of the story we're telling ourselves. And how do we do this? One way we can do this is by asking ourselves some self-reflective questions. And here are 3 self-reflective questions that might support you in this inquiry as to why we choose to label somebody as difficult. So the first question is, what is that person doing, or how are they being, that is problematical for me, that leads me to label them as difficult? The second question is, do I allow my story to cloud my perspective of that person as difficult? And the third is, do I behave in a certain way toward that person based on my story? So it's important to take steps to become conscious of our stories. The 2 questions we can ask ourselves in this inquiry are, how am I behaving toward another based on my story? And am I building a case against another or attempting to solidify a case against another based on my story? The next step is to become curious about whether or not I'm perpetuating another's behavior as a result of my story. Am I contributing to that other person's being difficult through my story and my reactivity? The fact is, there are difficult people in the world. And the question is whether some of these folks are really difficult in and of themselves, or whether I am a major contributing factor to their being difficult through my story. And more sincerely, honestly, and self-responsibly, how do I know the difference? So I invite you to reflect on the following thoughts that might inform you with respect to your definition of difficult and how you arrive at that definition. Each of us is writing our own book on our own life, and we base our criticisms and judgments of another on the assumption we know what went on in their life. I like to say that everybody is in chapter 3 of their life, and really nobody knows what went on in chapter 1 and chapter 2. And this approach may support us to be less judgmental and give the other the benefit of the doubt, and thus be more open, accepting, and understanding and compassionate in the way we relate to others when we initially want to judge them as difficult. No one gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a jerk today. No one gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to be difficult today. So maybe it's a good idea to pause, to take a few deep breaths and sense into your arising reactivity, mental, emotional, physiological, and ask yourself, why is this well-meaning, decent person choosing to behave in a difficult manner? And be curious, and breathe again, and see if you still feel as reactive. And if you do, be curious as to why. What does being reactive get you?